Okay, sounds good. So when do you guys
Perfect.
want to? Oh,
Oh yeah, it started. So everyone, my name is Talha. I'm the co-founder and CTO at remotebase.com. With me is Alan. So Alan is the CTO at Bridge Financial Technology. A little bit about Alan. I was, by the way, going through your profile and found it really interesting. To be honest, like Alan did his BS from University of Illinois in mathematics and actuarial sciences as well, right? And then Alan did his master's in finance from University of Illinois, and then Alan did another master's from University of Chicago in computer science. So from being in mathematics to finance to computer science, that's pretty interesting. Alan did was the co-founder at Project FixUp, and then now Alan is working as the CTO at Bridge Financial Technology. So very interesting, Alan, from switching fields to being a co-founder and now working for a company that is growing pretty fast. So how has your experience been so far?
yeah, it's been yeah. Thank you for that, Tala, that introduction. It's been a really fun ride. I think that I enjoyed majoring in math, but I never sort of found a very good professional fit with that. I spent a brief time as an actuary, and if you don't know, the actuarial science industry is quite structured in terms of career progression, which I did not like. And I sort of tried different iterations on math and technical or quantitative skills to find my place in the world professionally. And part of that was, going into the finance industry, or a big part of that, I should say, was going into the finance industry and trying to become a quant on Wall Street and sort of, which I did. I worked on high frequency trading algorithms and things like that. But the central issue for me was, I wanted to get back to my roots a little bit in terms of just solving a problem and feeling connected to the solution of that problem. And I wasn't necessarily serviced by that in a purely quantitative field. And that's not to say that that's just to say that it's not for me. So then, so I ended up going back to my first love, which is computer science, and been loving it ever since.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Like, you did not have any formal education in computer science, yet you chose to, do a master's in it. So how was it like doing a master's in something that I'm assuming that you did not know a lot about it? I mean, we were discussing this even before the podcast, and you said that you've been a hacker for a very long time. So I'm assuming that you were a hacker before you decided to do a master's in computer science.
Yeah, I started writing code actually at the age of 10, if you can believe it.
That's too early. Even I didn't do that.
On. Yeah, I first where I had sort of nerdy surroundings growing up. I worked on BASIC growing up, and then I discovered C. Really fell in love with C a lot, and then found out about Python and Java and all these wonderful things in high school and college. And it was sort of just like at the peripheral for me. It was more of a hobby. And I never really thought much more than that. I think that what it was like going through a master's program, having done a lot of I actually think that the master's was quite approachable for me, because I think a lot of and this might resonate with a lot of your audiences, there's quite a bit of fear among my my colleagues in the master's program around algorithms. The University of Chicago has.
We all are afraid of algorithms, by the way. Yeah.
And they, U Chicago has a really good math program, and they have a very tough algorithms course, and it's quite infamous among the students and alum and things like that. And I think that my mathematics training really prepared me for that side of it. And I think that continues to serve me to this day. Just being able to think through, go from programming language to programming language and think through, okay, what is it fundamentally that you're doing? Like, how are the equations getting processed, and how are you kind of moving through the data? It's you get that training as a computer scientist, but you really get exposed to that stuff as by just majoring in pure math, and it's been helpful. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty curious. Like you said that you wrote your first line of code at the age of 10. What did you write? Was it a printf or was it a fully functional software?
I wrote a I don't know if this is something you were supposed to do as a kid or not, but to this day, I wrote a thing that would modify America Online, and the modification would automate certain tasks that I wanted to do. Sometimes those things were kind of, playful jabs at my friends, or, just kind of whatever. So it was primarily driven by America Online.
Oh yeah, you were talking about. So at the age of 10, you wrote your first line of code, you wrote your first software. What happened afterwards? Like, what were you feeling around this time? Like, were you sold on the idea that you're going to be the computer scientist, or you were still not sure, like, where are you headed or why are you doing it?
No, I wasn't. I didn't know what I want. I mean, I think I was just like a lot of kids that were curious about a lot of things. My friends and I liked video games. We liked computers. We liked riding bikes. I was a very kind of do-it-yourself builder type of kid. Like, an example is I would actually get like parts to assemble bikes, and or like if other people in my neighborhood had a bike and they wanted to like disassemble the parts or something, or they didn't need a part or whatever, I needed a chain, like something like this. So I was always kind of just curious about making things and building things, and I didn't know where that would like end up, mechanical engineering or chemical engineering or like something like this, but I always just knew that I wanted to like create things.
Yeah, and Alan, an important question here. So I come from Pakistan. So a lot of people in Pakistan, they're technically very sound. So and I know a lot of people who start coding at a very early age, or they're interested in technology one way or the other. But when they start college, they're completely clueless. Like, a lot of them don't want to pursue computer science or any technical degree for that matter, because they're not prepared, or they don't know how to go about it. So were you also like that when you were about to go to college, or because you were dabbling with code and softwares and all, but then you chose to do a bachelor's degree in mathematics? So why was that? Like, I'm curious to know the process of decision making.
Yeah, I think it was, so the University of Illinois has a very good computer science program, which is where I went to undergraduate. And so it was a very popular thing to do. Honestly, and this is, slightly embarrassing, I wanted to make sure that my college years were very fun. And I had friends that majored in computer science and or like any of the engineering disciplines, and they were just always in the lab, like all the time. If you're a chemical engineer, you're in the lab because you're in the lab. If you're a computer science engineer, if you're in computer science, you go in and what kind of keeps you in the lab is like the code is compiling, or you're working on a bug or something.
Oh yes.
And math was things like math and physics, and maybe to a lesser extent physics, but some of these more theoretical majors, they were a little bit more freeing in terms of your time, I thought. You get your homework assignment, you read it, there's a few questions on it, you can think about it, and then you can have those thoughts in your head and go and do other things. So I found just the subject matter, like the format of pursuing the major, a little bit more asynchronous. And part of it, honestly, was my first year at the University of Illinois, my friends and I took a road trip, and
nice.
it was such a seminal moment for me growing up. You know, like the almighty road trip we kind of hear about and see about in movies, and like what's going to happen here. And I was very excited about it. And
where did you go? Sorry. Where did you go for the road trip? Like
we went. I think the first year we went to Daytona, Florida. I want to say it was always like different spots in Florida. So we would go to Daytona or Miami or you know, whatever. So, and I think from Central Illinois it was like I want to say like a 15-hour drive or something like this.
Yes.
And University of Illinois was on semesters, so we had a break in the fall and then a break in the spring, and then you were off for a good amount of time over the winter.
You were always fond of Florida, by the way. That's why you settled here as well, like from road trips to living here forever. I mean, at least not forever, for now. I mean, that's gotta mean something. So nice. So road trips, and then you were having these road trips with your friends, and you were also pursuing mathematics in Illinois. So what happened afterwards?
So afterwards, I graduated. I wasn't quite sure what to do with a math degree. I went into the insurance industry, spent some time as an actuary, and that's and I would say really in college, my interest in finance really picked up, and I loved the sort of I was attracted to what I think is just the amount of data. There's something very empowering in finance about just having all of the data centralized and combined and collected and aggregated in the right way that can enable you to make decisions and solve problems. And so I think I went about finance not through an engineering lens, but through the quantitative and technical lens. So starting off as an actuary, and then wanting to do, I pursued a PhD in finance so that I could become a quant on Wall Street and sort of get into the really mathematical side of the business. But in doing that, I worked at hedge funds and market making shops, and I definitely got that experience that there's a lot of data. It comes in very quickly. You need to have pipelines and aggregation and the ability to process that data and turn around and sort of, you know, make something out of it. And that just sort of started piquing my interest even more and more and more over time.
And it involved maths as well. Like you were using whatever you learned in your degree in this in the industry.
And I think computer science has been very empowering for me because, you know, I ended up working at a firm that had quants on staff and PhDs, and they seemed happy, they seemed well paid, and you know, they were great people, but they could never really make things happen at the end of the day. They would have these sort of, you know, research days where they would go to the library or whatever, just to kind of read up on papers and things like that. And they would sort of devise algorithms and then kind of turn around and make recommendations to the engineering team for implementation. But they were always sort of at the mercy of a roadmap and sort of having to wait. And I didn't want to wait. I wanted to execute and to build. So.
Yeah, that's right. So when did you decide to leave the financial industry? Like graduated and then started working with the financial industry right before you decided to pursue a master's in computer science, or did you make up your mind way before that?
No, it was at the same time. It was actually, I was working at a hedge fund, a buy-side speculative trading group out of Chicago this would be 2008. And at the same time, I started pursuing a degree in the University of Chicago, which was a little bit of a slow pursuit. I I took a few classes at that company and then transitioned jobs and had to pick it up. So I didn't end up graduating until 2013. But but yeah, so I sort of did it at night and on the weekends.
It's pretty amazing, to be honest, like, switching fields and all, and just, following your heart. And then obviously you had a chance to co-found a company as well. What was that like? You know, being a graduate, and then, instead of working for a big company, you decided to create your own. So what was that experience like overall as an engineer?
Yeah, I think I got that bug from the University of Chicago. They have this great
Nice.
MBA program there. It's very exciting and energetic. And I always had that thought of wanting to pursue something on my own throughout my adult life. And I think being around a bunch of business people that kind of I would, when in talking with them and engaging with them, they made it seem that, really hard problems for me, like raising money and sort of pitching an idea or whatever, for them just seemed so easy. And so I met someone who had an idea for a business, and which turned out to be this thing that we pursued called Project Fix Up. And that was a fantastic time in my life. It was very hard. It was very stressful. It was also very rewarding. We got through an incubator called Techstars, and met a lot of great people in that program. And I think that gave me the confidence to, and it was a great learning experience in many ways. It's kind of like its own master's degree, that on a whole nother level, learning about the world, learning about business, how software gets monetized and plays a part in that, and how you really put together a technology solution. Nothing can really happen in a vacuum, right? I mean, even if you want to make like video games and for the artistic appeal of it or something like that, I mean, you always have the economics and the business environment in the background that you have to satisfy and address. And that was incredibly helpful training for me. And it also made me not shy away from very early stage companies. Early stage companies can have tremendous benefits and competitive pay and an exciting, energetic place to work, and can be very, very fun. And that's where I first learned that I want to keep doing this.
It's pretty amazing. You said that you were curious about raising money, and I'm gonna tell you a secret. As an engineer,
Sure.
I always used to think that, raising money, I would never be able to raise money, and I'm not cut out for that. It's something you need a CEO for that, and who has a right mindset and all. And as an engineer, I will never be able to do it. So was it a main motivation for you as well, that you wanted to learn the science behind it, or were you also able to become a part of fundraising or any such activity while you were creating this company?
I don't think it's something that I set out like, I wanted to learn by doing that particular part of it. I don't know if I would enjoy being a CEO, for example. I think it's one of those jobs that sounds glamorous and cool, but having worked with CEOs so closely and so integral, I don't know. I think for me, my experience was a little bit more yin and yang. I agree with you. I don't know if it's that I don't know if I have a feeling that I can't do it or I wouldn't do it, but I simply don't want to, and that's that. I kind of want the money to come in and the financials to sort of be taken care of, and then to sort of be free to work on a problem and see the problem. And I think part of the job as a CTO or a VP of engineering or anybody in a leadership technology position is to understand the resources at your disposal and what you can
Very
and
much.
cannot do with your resources. Yeah.
Very much, very much. And talking about being a CTO and yin and the yang, how is it like working with Bridge as the CTO? Like that's your current job. Like what are your responsibilities? What do you do? How do you try and create impact? Personally, this could be a learning experience for me as well because I am the CTO at Remote Base, and you come across an array of problems that you have to solve daily. So, would love to know your experience overall working as a CTO.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very ongoing. It's very evolving. I'll probably say different things a year from now than I would right now. I think that where Bridge is currently is there's a lot of planning and provisioning of what is the future state of this company. We're growing quite quickly. We'll be doing our Series B round this year.
Nice.
And we've recently started landing very, very large enterprise contracts for us. And closing those enterprise contracts is actually easier than closing and negotiating and executing on these large enterprise deals is easier than what we were doing before, which was selling point solutions to financial advisors.
100%.
Seeing that is quite eye-opening. So one of the sort of lessons that I have about building a business is that I think really understanding your customer and what the economics of that customer are going to bring to you. If you and really making a line in the sand between B2B and B2C. If you're going to be B2C and you're going to have an app in the App Store, you really can't have I don't know what that looks like. I've never really done it outside of Project Fix-Up, which I don't think was a shining example of that. But you can't have, for example, a customer success team. You need to be thinking about scale with the level of economics that you're going to be afforded. Whereas having a software developer or a business as your customer, somebody else which is what we're doing right now, where what is downstream of you is a whole other business with a separate set of concerns and large average contract size. That is a completely different environment because you have to think. You have to think about, provisioning and allocating technology resources to solve the problem, both at hand, what's at hand today, but making sure that as you take on these large deals that in these large enterprise organizations, that what you're building is repeatable for the next contract that comes in, so that you're not sort of tightly coupling to anything, and you are, creating technology that is satisfying the use cases ahead of you, but that you're also able to execute on the future use cases that you might not know about.
Well, pretty much. And you use the word customer quite a few times. And I have a question here. Like a lot of the CTOs I meet, and I've met with a lot of people who are, some CTOs, some engineers and all. And most of them think that the job of a CTO is to make sure that tech is, up and nothing else. They don't need to they're not very hard on that, but the general perception is that a CTO does not need to interact with the customers, or they don't need to know a lot about, the business side of things. So do you think it's the right thing to do, or what was your journey like in terms of, because you've mentioned the word customers quite a few times. I'm assuming that you're very much, on the same page with the business side of things.
I think that there's a difference between a CTO that is hired versus one that co-founds a company or is a co-founder of a company.
Very well put. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think there's a different track and a different mindset to being an entrepreneur, where it is a little bit more, you don't need to be jack of all trades. I don't think that's the right thinking, but you do need to just solve the problems ahead of you. And those problems might not fit into a nice, neat little box sometimes. And the biggest, I think, asset that I have in my personality and my approach to the business has been growing it, has just been, I love this company. I love what we do. And I love the people that work here. And I will do anything and go to any mile for everybody involved in this, including our customers. And it's very important for me that we get things right. And sometimes that requires taking me out of the space of technology and to understand, what's right for the business, what's right for our customers, understanding the market, understanding, product development, and kind of having your hand into a lot of different things. Now, at the same time, I could see that, that's still, that's been fun and interesting and cool. But I'm also looking forward to a day where, we have the next level of scale, because I think that we've already started to run into scale challenges, and those create for really exciting technology challenges and opportunities. And that's that I think is the next phase.
That's always a good problem to solve, to be honest. Yeah. And did the fix-up mindset help you in this role, or has it been helping you? Because, I read somewhere that once you are a founder, you cannot go back. You cannot take that thing out of you. So did it help in this role? Because you're talking like a founder yourself. Like a founder would say that, do anything it takes to make sure that the company progresses. Sometimes you have to be the CTO. Sometimes you have to be the customer success specialist. And sometimes you just have to, go out there and research what customers want, what people want. And also, is it all the fix-up mindset, or did you train yourself to be like this?
I think it's part of my personality. I think that I'm an introvert by heart, and I internalize problems. And I think that if you're considering a degree if you're considering a career choice as a software developer or not, what I tell people is, I think what makes for a good software developer or any kind of engineer is really evaluating yourself and understanding, are you a person who internalizes problems or externalizes problems? And there are problems with sort of taking the extreme of both of those approaches. Someone who internalizes problems kind of takes on what is in front of them, and internalizing it, meaning they take those on as their problems. And now the problem with that is, if you can go too far, you can take on responsibility that you might not know how to do. It can make you feel worried.
Exactly.
It can stress
happens
you
all the
out.
time. Yeah.
But cause you to overwork, etc. But if you can move through that, and you're okay with living in that world, it can leave you feeling with a lot of fulfillment, a lot of feeling of accomplishment. Whereas somebody who externalizes problems is not somebody who's bad. It's just not, you want to be careful about how much your personality leans on that. That's a better choice for a product developer, I would say, than an engineer. And what I mean by externalizing the problem is that you care about the problem, but you want to involve a lot of different constituents in solving that problem. You want to develop your customers. You want to talk to your engineers. You want to talk to your CS people about how they would actually utilize the resulting impact or whatever. So I think for me, it's I think you can hire good people, and they can be on a spectrum of that, and it doesn't have to be that somebody who's passionate about the business needs to be a co-founder. I think you can have I think everybody just kind of has their personality, and but when you think about hiring someone, it's important to understand not just the role that you're hiring for, but how is this person that you're hiring going to engage the problem? Are they going to internalize the problem? Are they going to externalize it? And are they going to do too much of either thing? You need to know when to collaborate with your peers. You need to know when to, have your head down and execute on the mandate in front of you.
Yeah, I agree to that. use the word introvert, I would say introverted thinking is probably a biggest strength a technical person can ever have. One of the things that uh, I believe is that if you are an engineer, it's easier to create a manager out of you, or versus the other way around. If you're a manager, it's very hard to create an engineer out of you, or make you an engineer, or turn you into an engineer. So uh, part of being thinking that way is that as a CTO, in my opinion, you should definitely use this introverted thinking with all the departments you have in the company. Be it be customer success, be it be sales, be it be HR, anything. At least I do it on a regular basis. I just sit with these people and try to figure out what they are doing, how they do it, and how can I help them improve. So that has been my biggest job as a CTO at Remote Base, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I don't know if every day I'm wearing the CTO hat and I'm doing what the CTO is supposed to be doing, because I typically find myself in that role of managing people, whether that's managing down or managing up or managing laterally. I think that sometimes I feel like a VP of engineering, sometimes I feel like a CTO, and I think that's just that comes with the territory of being at a small company and building something on your own. But yeah, all this is to say, I would love to evolve and to a point where we have scale, or to have the scale where there is a little bit more focus and you can stay in your lane and you can sort of delegate things out. And in fact, that's Bridge is getting me there right now. And I'd say this is probably the main point of leadership development between my CEO and myself, where he's just constantly reminding me to not take on too much responsibility and hand things off to people and rely on others, which is a great, as you grow and scale and evolve, that's a great feeling, I think, in any role. The feeling that you can really rely on the people around you and develop trust around them and really come to appreciate your peers is phenomenal, regardless of what your job is.
Is it a universal thing that CTOs tend to take on responsibility they can never handle? I do that all the time. I start working on things that I know for a fact that I won't be able to complete, but I still start doing those. So now you're saying the same thing, that somebody has to remind you, in this case your co-founder, that don't take a lot of responsibility every now and then. So does that happen a lot with you, that you tend to take a lot of responsibility from time to time? Because I do that a lot, and a lot of people have to remind me that you be easy, man, that you don't have to do this. I'm gonna do it, you don't have to do it. So what's up with you guys?
I that resonates a lot with me. I do that all the time, and I don't think that you want to necessarily box that side up of you too much. You want to unleash it and tap into it when it's the right thing to do, because sometimes going in and solving a problem, or even just asking questions about them and being able to roll your sleeves up and deliver on some prototype, the technology landscape is littered with leaders that just went and did stuff. Google has built a whole culture around that, of their whole 20% initiative thing, where one day a week, do whatever you want to do. Some of the big projects, I mean, that's how we have Gmail. Paul Buchheit just sat down and made that because he felt like he wanted to do it.
Very much.
And I remember, Mark Zuckerberg gave a talk about how, they needed some memory caching thing, and that's where Memcache came from. And of course, Facebook, made React, and so you don't want to lose sight of that inner hacker in you. When you need to sit down and hack, you need to hack. But I think that as you go up the leadership ranks, you're more just kind of you're trying to scope that work down, establish POCs, spike out little projects, and sort of just get the thinking that's in your head, because what happens is you evolve. Like, I think that being a good technologist in a high level is not necessarily being able to write code. It's being able to make decisions. A lot of what technology devolves into, I find, is your ability, is your judgment capacity, your ability to make good decisions. And that can sometimes come from intuitive places. It can come from past experiences. But if you can establish a framework for, okay, my spidey sense says this, and I'm going to move that way, and here's how I would solve the problem, but I'm going to come up with a little prototype. And what can be, I think, difficult and challenging for people, and I don't, this is my own experience. I don't know too many CTOs, but you have to make sure that you don't get married to stuff, because you can have that spidey sense, but you can also hire really, really smart people that can probably do that job way better than you can, because they're going to be focused
100%.
Yeah,
they're more hands-on, to be honest. Like they're built for it, and you are not. Like, for me, by the way, do you still hack? Because I haven't coded in the past 3 months now, and that bugs me a lot. That was the first time in 3 months that I haven't written a single line of code, and that is bugging me every single moment of my life, to be honest.
I don't find myself time to get in and hack. I still enjoy being part of PR reviews, especially for big ones and things like that. Of course, there's nothing preventing you from just opening up your IDE. You might have to do it at 8, 9 o'clock at night.
Exactly.
But there's no stopping you in that front. I find that whenever I do that, it's usually less productive than I think. Or if I'm writing too much, that's the time to just kind of say, okay, this is a proof of concept project. I'm gonna throw this up on GitHub, get together with a few of my people and say like, hey, we have to take some of these ideas and put them into action. And usually what's more beneficial for me is just diagramming things out. I love even more than programming. I love getting in front of a whiteboard with people, talking about ideas. And that's harder to do these days. But you can get on a whiteboard sharing session and try to make that happen work.
Yeah, you're saying that it's harder these days. Is it because of the remote work? Because that was my next question. Are you guys working remotely? And if yes, then how does it fit into the equation, you collaborating and all? Because again, I live in the US and 80% of our team is distributed all around the world. Like, we have people working from 32 different cities all around the world. And that's the hardest thing for me, chasing time zones and, trying to collaborate with people who are far, far away.
Yeah, I think just to reminisce about a simpler time, maybe. We used to have a great office in Chicago that overlooked Lake Michigan, and it was. I think that we were in a non-remote environment, and we didn't even realize that it's not like a decision that anybody made that, okay, we have to we all have to live in the same city and go into an office and kind of sit there and be with each other. I think that thinking just kind of was in place from the 1950s or whenever the modern office kind of became into being. Yeah, and then all of that getting challenged in 2020 was interesting, because for us, we actually wanted to build out and expand our office, but everyone's started not showing up at work, and so that didn't make any sense to do. And so everyone, not only did people not show up to work, but we just kind of said okay, we're a remote company now, and that's that. And then what happened was quite interesting for us, which is everybody started leaving Chicago, myself included. I love Chicago. I'm from Chicago, and I think it's a great city. But think, you know, like with anything, I mean, if you are in one place for too long, you kind of want to go see the world a little bit and explore. And for me, that meant Miami and South Florida, and for other people, that meant other things. I will say this: I think now it's only resurfacing in a lot of, you know, in the media and everything. You know, there's recently a sort of, the CEO of Morgan Stanley said that, you know, this
very much
isn't an option. Like, people have to come back into work, and so I think
pretty against it. Like, very against it.
So it's almost becoming this divisive issue. I don't see us. I can see us having multiple offices, because it is fun to and beneficial to sort of get with your to get into a room with your peers, and when that happens, or when we're able to make that happen, it's quite enjoyable and it's quite productive. Having said that, you know, you can schedule on sites and kind of fly people around. It's a little bit more expensive and everything, but it's also offset a little bit the fact that you're not paying for office space month over month.
Very much. And so would you even want to go back? Because for me, I think I get more time if I'm working remotely. If I'm working out of my home office, you know, I get more time. I can get more things done. What are your thoughts? Like, would you ever want to go back to the office? Because for me, and I am an introvert, and I am an INTP, and physical interaction, it drains me out. Like, I cannot focus on work. I cannot get things done. If I am alone in my home office, I get a lot more done. So what's your take on the whole thing yourself? Like, would you want to go back?
I'd like to have more of a balance than we do today, and also that we had before the pandemic. And I always liked the model that the story of Zapier bootstrapping itself as a company, where they kind of started off as a remote company, and they were built out of Chicago. And their journey with that was that they knew someone that was somewhere, and they wanted to hire them, but they didn't want to make them like move to Chicago because they had a family and everything. And so they just kind of made it work. And the way that they made it work is they just, you know, started doing these quarterly on-sites every quarter and getting people together, and it turned into their culture. I think AWS to some extent has that culture. I've talked to people at AWS, and there's a lot of build up around reInvent and having this sort of annual thing where a lot of senior developers and product managers kind of go out and get together, not only with themselves one-on-one, but also to get in front of their customers and to give talks and, you know, things like that. It's been a while since I've been to reInvent, so I don't know how that's going today. But I do think that getting on some kind of cycle of getting together with your peers is healthy and useful. And when you are intentional about that time, it can be very productive, and people make good advantage of it. But I agree that, you know, just going into an office for the sake of going into an office, it can be quite
opening up your laptop. It could have done from anywhere. If I'm going to the office just to open up my laptop and work from there, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. By the way, I didn't know that Zapier was based in Chicago. I always thought the company was based out of Salt Lake City. I don't know why I was thinking like that. But...
I hope I have that right. Maybe it's not Zapier. I don't know. But there was some company that was out of Chicago like that was early on in remote engagement. And they had a story. I don't know. Maybe I'm not thinking the right.
Yeah, company, I mean, because with Zapier, it's fully bootstrapped, and then I think they did YC as well. They did not raise afterwards, and I think then they had an ARR of 100 million. So they are really solid story. But that's great. And thank you for your time, Alan. I think I've learned a lot. And a lot of the people in our audience, they are like remote workers, mostly engineers. So one last thing, and I know your time is precious here, but any advice for us, you know, working remotely from all around the world? So how do you see engineers who work remotely? Like maybe some of the people would want to apply into your company as well. So what's your take on work, you know, people working remotely and all?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about it. All I can say is one of the best experiences of my recent life is I went with a friend to Europe last summer. We spent a month working remotely. We both work in tech.
Oh, nice.
And we
different
just got
companies. Sorry, different companies.
Different companies, yeah. She works at a much larger company. I'm at a smaller company, and we got a couple of apartments in Vienna, is where we went to have our remote work existence, and then we took some vacation time, and throughout Europe, and we got to enjoy Europe a little bit. I don't know what advice or conclusions I have out of that, other than I personally loved it. I would really enjoy it. I think that living the opportunity to be able to live and work remotely is something that it is like fairly unique. You can't do it in hospitality, you can't do it in every industry, but certainly tech is highly lenient to that, and I think it's a job benefit that should really be embraced. And if you are, we have someone at Bridge who I never know where he is in the world. He's typically in the U.S. He kind of bounces around between Washington, D.C., New York, Minneapolis, and Seattle. He kind of has all those pockets. And I think that's great. I think thinking about not needing to have like a big giant house, which I think is the classic American dream, that of course comes with a lot of debt, especially these days, and sort of living in a more of a minimalist environment and being able to travel around. I think it's great. I wouldn't trade it. I don't want to say I wouldn't trade it for anything. I don't know what the future holds for me, but while you have it, I think it's something to be embraced and something to be enjoyed, and
very much
be intentional with it. So
very much. And you talk about the American dream. I read somewhere, I think Quora or something, but millennials are not chasing the American dream anymore. Like not a lot of people want big houses now, and people are more happy, traveling around the world and working, and having that flexibility in their lives, which has frankly worked really well for me. I was only able to move to the US because I could work remotely with remote base, and I can still work from here and expand the team. And it's beautiful that we have people working in the smallest of cities from Pakistan with Silicon Valley based companies, and creating a lot of impact, right from where they live. So it's pretty empowering overall, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Pretty much. Perfect, Alan. Thanks for your time today. I learned a lot, to be honest. I think our audience did too. Until next time. Thank you.
Yeah, this was great. This is such a fun chat. Thank you so much, Tella, and best of luck with everything. And I really appreciate your time as well. This is great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alan.